studying remotely in Canada. Brother Towfiq has lectured regularly in centres across Toronto, Canada, and is a teacher and Imam Salat at ACIC Maktab. He works with youth at many centres and focuses on working to build their Shia identity, especially in Aqaid and Islamic history. His goal is to give a fresh perspective on Islamic fundamentals and to help the next generation face contemporary challenges. Please help welcome Brother Towfiq with 3 loud salawats.
حبيب الله العالمين بالقاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل البيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجلين لا سيما بقية الله العالمين. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا هدانا الله. الحمد لله الذي جعلنا من المتمسكين بولاية سيدنا أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب. أما بعد، قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتابه الكريم: ولقد خلقنا الإنسان ونعلم ما توسوس به نفسه ونحن أقرب إليه من حبل الوريد. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Tonight we continue our discussions on Shia identity in our series of discussions. And tonight we want to continue actually from what we left off last night. And last night we discussed on the purpose of our existence and what we strive for. And when we worship and we're an abd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what is this ubudiyyah, right? We said that the goal, of course, was to be happy. And we touched on some discussions of freedom. And I want to open up that discussion a bit further. Inshallah, tonight I want to ask a really important question and then answer it. And that question is that, can I be spiritual but not religious? Today we see that, unfortunately, among a lot of people in the West, there's less of a religious aspect to their lives. But when you ask them, a lot of them, that if they're religious, they will answer, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. Now what is the spirituality that they look towards? They say, I believe in a God. I believe in whatever there is in the universe, but I don't tie myself down to one religion. I'd rather, all of these religions are useless to me, but I want to establish a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or a relationship with a being in the universe through my own way. And we all want to address this because this is a very controversial issue. Today we see a lot of people, they follow this kind of belief. Especially in the US we see a lot of this. Spiritual, but not religious. So inshallah we want to begin this discussion with a loud salawat. And on a baseline to begin this discussion, we discussed fitra. What is the fitra of insan? The fitra of insan, we can call it our innate nature. Insan has this innate nature to follow something. This is not taught. This exists in every single time, within every single group of people. From the very beginning of time, we see that insan is trying to look towards a God. And we, in our early religions, we had them looking for God in certain types of ways, whether that was through idolatry, whether that was through believing in multiple gods. And then later, through the Abrahamic religions, we found insan was trying to find God through a different manner. But let's look at that fundamental point, which is the fitra of insan. The fitra of insan was for them to seek a higher power. Because insan realizes, or all of us realize, that nothing cannot turn to something. Chaos cannot turn to order. So it's fundamental that we understand that there's a higher power, and there's something that we try to reach ourselves to. And that's our fitra. Every single insan has fitra. Sometimes it's much stronger, sometimes it's weaker. But that fire that exists within our hearts, that is encoded to our human DNA, which is called fitra, can never be extinguished. It exists in every time, it exists in every place, and it cannot be taught. So let's move this discussion forward from point A to point B. Now I understand the fitra. Let's understand what the human soul is. Because today, those who are spiritual, they believe in the human soul. They say that we do have our soul. And we need to discuss that aspect of that soul. Amir al-Mu'mineen Mawla alayhi salam, he says, Man arafa nafsa, arafa rabbah. He who knows himself, knows his Lord. So we need to understand that aspect of our soul. Insan is made of three parts: his mind, his body, and his soul. We can make it smaller, even. We can say it's your body and your soul, for the sake of the simplicity of our discussion. Insan has two aspects: the body and the soul. And sometimes we choose to neglect that aspect of our soul. And those who are spiritual, for example, they look at that soul and they say, I'm going to try to increase this level of spirituality within my soul. And in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاتَّقُوا يَوْمًا تُرْجَعُونَ فِيهِ إِلَى اللَّهِ ثُمَّ تُوَفَّى كُلُّ نَفْسٍ مَا كَسَبَتْ وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ. And beware a day in which you will be brought back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then every soul shall be recompensed fully for what it has earned, and it will not be wronged. Salawat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says you're going to be recompensed for the soul for every single action that you do. Understand, my brothers and sisters, this is a fundamental point to understand in regards to our soul. Every single thing you do, whether it's big or small, it affects your soul. Your body is a vehicle in which your soul is affected. So be very wary about this. When we say man arafa nafsa arafa rabbah, Mawla is trying to say that every single aspect of your body affects that soul. And you should know yourself and know how to feed that soul in the best manner. Because if you feed it the wrong things, then that soul will be led astray. And what does Islam do? Now let's talk about what religion does. Islam has been brought by the Holy Prophet to feed that soul. Islam has come to teach that soul how it should move, how it should act, how that body should react, and how that soul will be impacted in regards to that body's actions. This is why it's very important. Through our spiritual perfection, we need Islam and a guideline and a complete handbook to find that. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator and He's given you a complete handbook, why do you leave that behind and why try to find your own way yourself? Would we not say that that is a stupid idea? For us to take a handbook that tells us which way to go and what to do exactly, and say that I want to follow my own way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows us better than ourselves. We cannot say that our aql can comprehend everything. Our aql can comprehend many aspects. But on a very fundamental level, for spiritual purity, for spiritual perfection, we need to make sure that we follow Allah's plan. Salawat. Say there's a road from Sydney to Melbourne. Unfortunately, I don't know which other cities are close to Perth, so I'm going to use an example of Sydney to Melbourne. It's a very straight road. There's point A and there's point B. So, if you're going from Sydney to Melbourne, you take the traffic. You take a guide. You look at a map. It tells you turn left, turn right, turn here, turn here. If you turn wrong, it'll tell you. And after you follow this, you reach to Melbourne. Now, if we want to do this, we make sure we follow it. For what reason? because of my safety and the safety of others, I follow the rules of the road. If I don't follow the rules of the road, you see I'm going on the right side of the road. Now as Canadians, we follow on the right, so it's completely different. But for you, for example, you're driving on the right side of the road, when everyone's supposed to drive on the left. Can we do that? You say, Habibi, no. You have to follow the rules of the road. Because only through this can you travel safely from point A to point B. And that's like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He tells you this is the path. This is the way. You turn left here, you turn right here, and you get to Jannah. It's very simple. So it's very fundamental we understand that these rules that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts in place, it's for the organization of insan. So insan has this nazm, it has this order, so that it doesn't turn into chaos. And who better to choose that than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? The one who says in the Quran, وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ وَنَعْلَمُ مَا تُوَسْوِسُ بِهِ نَفْسُهُ. Certainly we created man, and we know what the soul that tempts him. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues, وَنَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْكَ مِنْ حَبْلِ الْوَرِيدِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I am closer to you than your jugular vein. And I know what tempts insan's soul. So when I try to say I'm spiritual but not religious, and I say that I'm following my spirituality and it's going to lead me, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told you what to do and what not to do. Don't try to make your own path. When Allah has brought what has needed and what to take and what to go through, and it completely conforms to our fitra. Sometimes we see certain religions, they exist, and they're against our fitra. They're against what our nature tells us. They're against our aql. Allah says, if you want to look at a religion, look at the religion itself. Sometimes we see that people, why do they say that they don't follow a religion? Oh, I saw the people from that religion, I didn't like their manners. The people from that religion acted this way, so it turned me away from Islam, for example. Don't look at the people of the religion. Look at the values that it carries. And if that value, it aligns with your aql, then follow it. It's very simple. So our reason cannot be because I saw so-and-so, he was a Muslim, and he lied. Then I don't follow Islam. Well, this is against our aql. We know that our aql cannot completely comply with something like that. And Islam, it has arrived here, and it's not against our aql. It's not against science. Some people, they fall into this trap. They're told religion is one thing, science is another. Science is completely against religion. Ya akhi, it's not supposed to be completely different. They're one and the same. Allah in Islam tells you why. Science tells you how. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you how He's done certain things. Or He tells you why He does certain things. We find that how through science. So it's important that we understand that they're not separate, but they go hand in hand. We see that during the Middle Ages, when Europe was completely dark, who was it that held the lanterns of science? Who is it that held that light of knowledge? Was it not Khwarazmi? Was it not Ibn Sina? Was it not Sheikh Tusi? Was it not Jabir ibn Hayyan? These were on the forefront, Muslim scholars who brought science to where it is today. They brought algebra to what it is today. They brought mathematics to what it is today. So it's very important that we don't make mistakes like that. Religion is here to help us, to give us the signs, to make us know that's what can help us in our soul to be able to reach a level of spiritual perfection. Salawat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, He says, وَيُحَرَّمُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْخَبَائِثَ وَيَدَعُ عَنْهُمْ إِصْرَهُمْ وَالْأَغْلَالَ الَّتِي كَانَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He commands them to do good and forbids them from evil. He permits them from what is lawful and forbids them from what is impure. Let's listen to this one. And relieves them from their burdens and the shackles that bound them. He's talking about insan. What shackles are bounding us? When we realize those shackles are our desires. Those shackles are that which bring us down. And we discussed this last night. We touched upon this point about personal freedom. Today we have an incorrect version of freedom. Freedom means I'm able to do whatever I want. No, it's not whatever you want. Because at the end of the day, if you, for example, say, I'm free to drink alcohol, you are a slave to that alcohol. I'm free to do this haram. You are a slave to that haram. So let's not fall into that trap to say that we're truly free when we do haram, for example. We are slaves to different things. And Mawla al-Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, before he passes, he writes a will to his sons. And let's listen to what this will is. He says to Imam Hassan alayhi salam, he says, keep yourself above every low thing, even though it might take you away from your desires. Because that's what you will receive in return, is nowhere near that which you will have to give of yourself. And let's listen to this very important point. وَلَا تَكُنْ عَبْدَ غَيْرَكَ وَقَدْ جَعَلَكَ اللَّهُ حُرًّا. Imam Ali alayhi salam says to his son, he says, do not let anything enslave you, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made you free. Salawat. Do not be a slave of anything else. Allah has created you free. He has created you hurran. وَلَا تَكُنْ عَبْدَ غَيْرِكَ وَقَدْ جَعَلَكَ اللَّهُ حُرًّا. And there's a very important story, and I'm going to end off with this point. This is the story of Bishr al-Hafi. During the time of Imam al-Kazim alayhi salam, he passes by a house. He walks by his house, and he hears the sound of music. It's very loud. And he hears it outside of his house, and he asks a slave woman there of that house, a worker, a servant, and he asks her, is this owner of this house with loud music, is this owner a slave or is he a free man? She answers, it is a free man. Listen how Imam al-Kazim responds. He says, you're right. If he was a slave, he would fear his master. Then she went back in and she tells Bishr al-Hafi. He says to him that Imam Kazim there was someone who came by and he said this about you. And then he realized, after hearing that, what he had done. He ran barefooted to run after Imam Kazim and after that, he completely changed. That's the story of Bishr al-Hafi. Al-Hafi means someone who is barefooted. He was known by that name. Because he realized that he's not free. Because if he was free, he would not fear his master. So let's make sure that we understand that concept of freedom. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He brought religion onto us, when He brought Islam, inna deen and Allah Islam, when He brought the most beautiful religion, He brought that to save us, to tell us exactly what we should do to find that happiness, to find that perfection. Because happiness cannot be found through anything but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inna al-insana lafi khusr. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Asr, indeed mankind is in loss, except if we follow Him, except if we follow His laws. So let's not fall into that trap of spirituality. Spirituality is empty without Islam. Islam makes that spirituality so sweet. Because without it, there's nothing, right? It's just insan following whatever he desires and calling it spirituality. Only through Islam do you find that purity, that spiritual perfection. Inshallah, we end up with this dua. Ya Allah, we ask you to make us near to our Imam and one of his loyal companions. And Ya Allah, we ask you to keep us away from the shar and bring us towards the khair. And Ya Allah, we ask you to make our lives the lives of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad, and our deaths the deaths of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. And Ya Allah, we ask you to guide us towards the straight path. And Ya Allah, we ask you, do not take us from this world unless you have forgiven us. And Ya Allah, we ask you to make our worship the best type of worship, the ones who worship you because you're the only one worthy of our worship. And Ya Allah, we ask you to grant us the intercession of Abu Abdullah on the Day of Judgment. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah wa ala al-arwah allati hallat bi fana'i. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. مع الصلوات.